Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. One of the things I never did when I first started was I didn't really pay much attention to the cost of raw materials versus the price that I eventually sell something for. And so this time I thought I would weigh out the amount of materials I'm going to be using for this one, as well as the cost of the stone, add them together, and get the overall figure of what my expenses are for this, generally, at least a rough estimate. And when I'm done with the piece, I'll take a look at it and I'll kind of gauge what I think I can probably get for it, given the venues that I have to sell in and the region that I live in. And that may vary from region to region, but it should give you a rough idea of how much you can charge above the cost of raw materials. Like I said, it varies from place to place, and you'll have to make that judgment yourself. But it seemed like an interesting experiment. So before we do, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I have two brand new patrons. I have Robert O. and Adrienne B. Thank you for signing up. I do really appreciate your support. I think you'll find, as I have, that my patrons are a group of skilled and nice people who are willing to share their ideas. So enjoy getting to know them over there. And thanks to all my previous patrons as well. I couldn't do this without you. The other group is my YouTube channel subscribers, and we just passed 24,000 subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you for that. If you watch these and you haven't subscribed yet, why haven't you? It doesn't cost anything, and you'll get a notification if you choose to when I put out a new video. So I'd love to have you as a follower as well. Well, thank you to my current followers, and thank you for the nice comments. Thank you also for the financial help with buying me a coffee, or the super thanks, or buying my merch or my ebooks. All of that stuff really makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without that. So thank you for that. All right, well, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get in my merch store. There's a number of different models. This particular one has a gauge to inches to millimeters chart on the back, which I find pretty useful. Some of the other ones have different charts or information about metalsmithing, so check one of those out. I think they're a great way to keep track of your projects. I like them because they have this dot matrix in the background, which is kind of hard to see on camera, but it makes for a nice graph paper sort of thing, which helps me with my drawings because I'm not super good at drawing. So, but it's nice to have a record of what you made, so you can go back and recreate it if you want to. So get yourself one or two of those. This is what I had in mind today. So I was going to make, this is actually going to wrap around and be attached over here on top of this one. So you're looking at the flattened out version of the ring. I've picked out pretty little Peridot, and we'll be setting that in a bezel, so that'll be right there. And so like I said, we're going to be talking about the amount of metal and how much it costs right now, because silver is really expensive at the moment. So let me grab my scale. And these are the raw materials that I have here. I have a little bit of 18 gauge wire, which is 1 millimeter round. This is 16 gauge square, and it's a small piece of it. It's 1.3 millimeters. 22 gauge sterling sheet. 22 gauge is 0.66 millimeters, if I recall. And this is a little bit of 18 gauge round. Oh, I have two pieces of 18 gauge round. I don't need two pieces. I'm not sure why I have two. Let's make sure I weighed them right then. Oh, and a little bit of bezel. This is 26 gauge 3/16 inch bezel. 4.76 by 0.41 millimeters. So let's put all these on the scale and see where we're at. 0.347. So I accidentally had too much of this on here. So I'm going to have to recalculate. I initially thought it was going to be $18.19 worth of silver, but it's actually 0.347. So we got 0.347 times 48.5. Okay. I'm just going to do this on a calculator to save time, so forgive me. And that gives us $16.83. $16.83. So that's about what the amount of, so that's about how much that silver's worth there. And then the Peridot that I have, I bought two of them for $20 out of a bargain bin at the last gem show. and so it's about $10. So we got a total of $26.83 is the cost going in here. Okay, that's not counting little things like solder and flux and stuff like that, but those are pretty negligible, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But we'll use that as a baseline. And let me talk about the design itself a little bit. It's going to be this piece of 22 gauge sheet, and I'm going to create this wavy design out of this 16 gauge square, and we're going to solder it down to that sheet. I'm going to texture the outside. I'm also going to make a bezel for the stone out of this. The 18 gauge is to make a little step on the inside for the stone to rest on, and I'll put two little rings, one on top of the other, to make that step. And then we'll add a little piece of this around the outside of that too. So I'm guessing there's going to be enough left over from this to do that. But if not, I'll just add a little bit more and we'll raise the price a little bit. But that's basically what we're going to do, and I'm going to texture around that one too before I solder it on probably. And then we'll start assembling it. So if you're new to my channel, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's the air acetylene torch that they make. It draws in atmospheric air to mix with acetylene and creates a nice hot flame, hotter than propane or butane, but not as hot as oxyacetylene because it's not pumping pure oxygen into the flame. It's just air. But it's a great torch. I love it. It's perfect for silver. So let's make sure we got the end flat here on both sides. Actually on one side. The other side I'm probably going to have to cut a little bit off. I use the #1 tip on my torch for most things. Let's get that flat. If you want, you can use your miter vise jig if you have one of those. Let's make this into a circle. If the sound or anything is weird on my video today, it's because we're doing some work on the basement where I work, and so I don't have my curtains up. I normally put to block some of the sound of the heating and cooling system in our house, which is also down here. It's giving me an opportunity both to clean up my mess down here and reorganize, as well as get some stuff fixed in the basement. So we live in an old house, so there's always projects. We're getting some repiping done because we have old galvanized steel pipes that make our water really rusty. Okay, so we're going to cut this off right where I made that little mark. I usually make these into kind of an angular shape to get the best results. Certainly not necessary, but I find it useful. And a lot of people do things in a lot of different ways. As long as it works well for you, I guess it probably doesn't matter. Sometimes people get kind of rigid in their ideas about the way things have to be done. I try to avoid that if I can. That way I get better at stuff. I already have a little bit of solder on the pad here from yesterday. Doesn't take long to solder bezels. There's not a lot of metal there, so. Okay, I'm going to shape these by getting rid of these sharp corners that I just made. If you have a jump ring mandrel, you can use that, or a bezel mandrel, whichever you want to call it. Okay, let's see where we're at on size. I think we're pretty good. You don't want to have a lot of extra leeway when you have a faceted stone like this. If you've never made a step bezel before and you want a detailed explanation, I just did a video recently about how to do a step bezel, so you can focus on that one. I think that one's a very complete video, so you shouldn't be missing too much in that one. Also, if you're enjoying the video, it would help me a great deal if you'd hit the like button, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There's no cost to it. You get all sorts of good content. It helps me out. It's a win-win for everybody. Okay, so like I said, I have this 18 gauge wire, and I'm going to file the end flat, and then I'm just going to make two little rings that fit right inside of there. You don't have to do them this way. You can wrap them around a round nose pliers or bail making pliers, or just some cylindrical object you have that's about the right size. But I like doing it this way because I can size it up or down pretty easily if I overlap it like that. And I want it to fit relatively snugly in there. I prefer to cut it just a little bit large and then snip away little pieces until it fits in there tightly. You don't want an unsightly gap in your ring, you know. But that's real close. I think we can probably get it in there. If it's really tight, you got to be careful though. It may try to ride up on one side a little bit. So when you do that, make sure you push it all the way down on both sides so it's flat. Boy, when I started doing this in the 90s, sterling silver was $4 about per troy ounce. Now it's $48 per troy ounce. That's not much fun when you order materials. You don't get near as much fun stuff. The easiest way to solder these in is to flux it and then set the bezel itself on top of a few pieces of solder. I'm going to cut a few fresh ones since those ones are so oxidized. We'll just make it on a flat spot here. Flattish. You're going to heat it from the outside like you would any bezel. It is possible to overheat these kind because you're using sterling silver for the rings on the inside and fine silver on the outside. Fine silver has a slightly higher melting temperature, and so if you get it too hot, it'll stay whole, but the rings will start to kind of melt and spread out on the inside. Now I'm just going to take it and finally flush and apply. Okay, let's see how it looks pretty good. Doesn't stick out really, so we're good. Sometimes I'll put a third one in there if it's a really deep stone. This one is okay though. So I'm going to set him to the side for a minute. And then I think, where did my little, there it is. This that I made, this was some 14 gauge that I made by pulling it through a draw plate into 16. And so it's a little bit more hardened. So I'm going to anneal this. If you're new to annealing, annealing is where you heat it up to get rid of the work hardening that occurs when you either stretch it or bend it or pull it through a plate or whatever. It causes tension in the metal and it makes it stiffer and stiffer. So if you want to reduce that, we just need to heat it until it's kind of a red color. Let it cool off most of the way, and we can cool it off the rest with some water. And that gets rid of all the hardening, so it's soft and malleable again. When I first started, the cost of the metal was so negligible that I almost didn't really even think about including it in my final cost because, you know, $4 an ounce, you get quite a bit of silver out of that. You know? So this is about 1/3 of an ounce, so this would have been $1.50's worth of silver. Oh, for the good old days. So let's straighten this out. I find when I'm straightening wire, if I just use my pliers to hold it and then use my fingers to bend it, I have a lot better results. Pretty good. Let's grab this. I'm trying to think. Maybe we can use... Use a dapping punch. It's still too big. That's pretty close. It's just a tiny bit less. Maybe this one, because it's going to spring back a little bit when I bend it around this. So let's start. I don't want the solder joint to be way over here. I want it to be somewhere in the middle. So let's bend it around this. Square wire has a tendency to try and twist on you, so you're going to have to kind of control that because it's trying to find an easier way to bend. So it pooched out a little bit downwards that way. I'm going to use my marker here to kind of make a mark where it starts to curve in. So right about there. And we might be able to just use my bell making pliers to do the rest here. That side's pretty good. I need to get this side looking a little better. There we go. Maybe it would have been easier to do it on the end. I just thought it would be more visible. But I guess it's going to be underneath the stone, so... Next time I'll do it on the end. Okay. Take a moment to kind of straighten this back out because it's going to be twisting a bit. I think we're pretty close, so I'm going to cut that. I'll do a little final shaping after it's all put together. Make sure these are lined up pretty well. And I still, there's not some solder? No, I'll cut a little bit more. Oh, there's a piece. That should do it. Sort of pleasing just by itself. So here's a trick. I was using 22 gauge sheet, and when I put it up against it I realized I was just a little bit too long on this, so this needed to be slightly longer. So I rolled it in my rolling mill just gently a little bit, and it stretched it out just enough to where I could get it on there. So I didn't lose much of the thickness of it, but I was able to stretch it just a skosh. Let's make sure this is pretty flat. It should be pretty flat since I just rolled it. The most visible part of the ring is going to be these round ends here, and so I want them to be pretty symmetrical so they don't look too different from each other. So I don't want a lot of solder slop on the inside of that cavity area. And so I'm going to put the solder around the outside after I flux things up here. I'm always fluxing things up. Well, that probably did it. So let's find out. I just didn't want any gaps going all the way around. That would be embarrassing for all of us. I do not see any gaps, so I'm going to let this sit in the pickle just for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to trim this off. I didn't let it pickle for all that long. I just took a little back break. So I'm going to cut it as close as I can. So you can also keep in mind that all of the stuff that I'm cutting off here will end up being recycled. So you can deduct that from the overall cost because you can reuse that again. If you could find it after it goes flying. Sometimes I'll use these. Now don't tell anybody I'm doing this because I'm using these tools in the wrong way. I'm going to snip out much of that. These are wire cutters, Chad. If you like, file this all manually, brace this against something and do all that kind of stuff. But I have found it doesn't detract from my experience. If I use a ball burr on a Dremel to get rid of the excess, and then I can smooth it out with a file or with a rotary wheel, like a silicone abrasive rubber wheel on that too. So let's go do that. Okay, so you can see I have kind of a largish ball burr on there. You want to make sure to hold on to this tight because the disadvantage of using a ball burr like this is they can catch on things and kind of jump around. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to hold it low and I'm going to go at as slow a speed as I can. If you have a pedal-driven rotary tool, which I do not, you can go at a nice slow speed and take it real easy probably, but the Dremel I have to go at its slowest speed. Just going to carve away the excess. These ends I'll get with a single cut bastard file. So I had a little bit of a thought while I was cleaning this up, and I think this will stand out better if I don't texture the ring that goes around here. So we need to solder a plain ring around this one, and then we'll texture this one. I'm going to let this pickle for a while we solder a ring around that. And then we'll, because I was going to pre-texture the one that went around here, but I think it'll look better if we don't. That's just my thought. Okay. Might be able to get this pretty close with bail making pliers. Pretty close to this one down here. Probably close enough. So I want it to be snug on there. Definitely don't want to have excess because then I'll have a sloppy solder joint around there. So hopefully we'll get this lined up and then we'll see. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to do something called pick soldering on this one, which I think is a super handy technique to learn. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link up there for you. I have a pretty good video about it, and it's one of those skills that really made things a lot easier for me when I figured it out. And it allows you to place solder pretty much wherever you want with impunity. close. Let's just file the inside a skosh, and we'll file the outside of the bezel a skosh. Let's push that down and see if it goes in there. Sure. And it's nice and tight. Go ahead and file this bottom flat too. So I'm going to do a little texture on these that I use the edge of my chasing hammer here. I think it makes for a nice little kind of deep texture, so I'm going to just work my way all the way around here. Okay, so I like texturing stuff like that. It makes it stand out from the rest of the metal. Now the only problem is when you have a recessed area like this, it's kind of hard to get in there and polish. So I'm always curious, and if you have a suggestion, that's one of my most troublesome areas as far as polishing. So if you have ideas on how to get in there better, let me know, because I always struggle with that, and I like to hear how people do things. So leave me a comment. Alright, I'm going to do a little pre-polishing, I think, with a blue fine polishing wheel, and just kind of try and work it in there a little bit. And then I'll be right back and we'll shape this and put the bezel on. So I got that kind of pre-polished in there to get most of the goobers out of there. Let's go ahead and shape this around the mandible. I'm going to start kind of low down here. Flip it over once in a while. I wanted to kind of solder that right like that. So I think I'm going to file a little bit of a flat spot right here. So a lot of times what I'll do when I need to solder something like this, I really want to be able to heat it from all sides and see what's going on. Put it on the third hand here where I can get a good view of it, and nothing can really fall off there. And the thing is, we need some solder in between the two, so I either need to sweat, there's probably enough in there from where I soldered the square wire to the outside, but just to be safe, I'm going to pick a little bit on here. So we'll flux this, flux that, put a little tiny bit of solder on the end of each of these. So when you use the third hand, it bleeds off a lot of heat, and so oftentimes, while it's convenient to use them, they can create a problem because it takes a lot longer to get the piece up to the soldering temperature. So you could, if you wanted to, use a different kind of solder. I'm just going to go ahead and use hard solder on this one too. Most times you can get by with just hard. in my opinion. There are some situations where the other stuff comes in very handy though. If you go to position this on here and you find that it's too wobbly or something, you can always clear it off and file it a little bit flatter if you need to. We'll see. That looks pretty good to me, but it always looks good until I get it soldered on, and then it doesn't look good anymore. Then it's not straight or something. Let's give it a shot. Most of the mass is in the band on this one, and so you can kind of avoid the top until it gets to the point where we're getting close to that solder flow point. The top being much smaller, it won't take very long to get up to soldering temperature. So. Alright, well, I'm going to let that soak in the pickle for a little bit and go take a rest, and we'll come back and finish that up. Okay, here's the final outcome. I think it turned out pretty good. After polishing, I went ahead and I applied a little bit of hammering to this outer edge because some of it had gotten a little bit smoothed out. So let's go ahead and set this stone. And while we're doing that, I'm going to talk about what I think this is probably I could get for it in my area, which is northern Colorado. And I already filed this down to about the right height for the stone. So we should just have to kind of set it. I think that's going to be pretty. I do this a little differently than some. I use my chain nose pliers, the side of it I've kind of polished up a little bit. And I can use that as a bezel pusher like this. Now push from each side. Once you feel you have it pushed in all the way, then I can kind of do the burnishing stage, which is where I use the rounded outer part here and rub that top edge really hard to make sure that it lays down over the stone. And with something like this, with a precious stone, or a semi-precious stone, I guess I should say, and it's kind of a unique style. People know it's handmade by a real person. And so I would guess in a gallery around here, I could probably get upwards of $150 to $250, depending upon how I'm feeling at any given moment. So the point that I think I'm trying to make here is that when you're buying a piece of jewelry from someone who makes jewelry in something that, while expensive right now, is still relatively inexpensive as far as raw materials, $26. Materials cost probably a little bit less because I didn't include all the trimming off of things that I did. What you're really paying for with something that's made by a local artisan or something is you're paying for their time and their energy that they put into it. So the lesson I learned early on was you need to pay yourself a fair wage, and also think about what the market will bear given the current economic situation where you're at. So don't undersell yourself, though, because I think I could certainly get at least 150 to 200, maybe 250 for that in the right venue. So, all right, well, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. All right, well, that was the Peridot kind of wavy band ring, and I hope it gave you some things to think about regarding pricing your pieces. If you did enjoy it and find it useful, would you make sure to hit the like button before you go? That would help me out a great deal. And I would love it if you would take a moment and go visit my main channel page. I have 540 plus videos now, so there's a lot of content to sort through, and I think you'll almost certainly find something else that you can use or you might find interesting. There's lots of projects over there, so go to town on those. I do 3 videos per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday, so there's tons of content always coming out. So I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel, and make sure to visit the video description down below. There's some important links there. If you're interested in finding out more about my Patreon community, there's a link to that. There's multiple tiers of membership, the lowest being where you just get rid of the YouTube ads, and then some other upper tiers where you get some different privileges. So including original content and live streaming with me. There's a link to my merch store where you can get those nice design idea sketchbooks I was talking about at the beginning. I find those very handy and useful for keeping track of my projects, and I've probably filled up 5 of them by now. But it's nice to be able to go back and look at the previous projects to see how you did them in case you wanted to repeat them. So finally, there's a link to my ebook. My latest one, which is 2024's tutorial guide. It covers all of the tutorials I did in 2024, including a page for each one with a link to the video, a picture of the sketch that I drew, a picture of the final product, a list of materials, a difficulty rating, and some notes I made about the project that may not have been mentioned in the video itself, like did I learn something, would I do it differently, were I to do it again, did I think it was a success or a failure. Not everything you do comes out to be how you want it to be, so it's a good way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips and a really nice way to support my channel. So get yourself one or both of those. There's also a 2023 one, and make sure to come back and see me again. Alright, thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.